Welcome to Surviving Society.
Welcome to Loco, Parentis, and I'm your host, Twayna Mayne. Today I'm joined by my good friend, my old friend, one of my oldest friends, Karl. Karl and I have known each other for years. We went to university together. And recently, I think over the years, we've kind of divulged little bits of information about ourselves. And it turns out that we've both had what would be classed as kind of like adverse childhood experiences. I think that's a good way of describing it. Yeah.
Childhood adverse experience.
Yeah.
That's what they call it.
And it's kind of, and in that we've kind of discussed the effects of those things on us sort of growing up and how we've attempted to come to terms with that, cope with that, manage ourselves in sort of socially and not socially, but like privately and like more like terms of like the impacts and the effect that's had on us physically sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely.
So we've talked a lot. I remember recently we talked about how I didn't realise until it was COVID that made me realise how much stress I'd lived with pretty much all of my life. And it took COVID to give me a chance the first time to have a rest.
Yeah, that was a really good, interesting conversation, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And we're sort of talking about the different kinds of layers of stress that accumulate. And now like being in this kind of dysregulated state can feel so normal that you don't know what it's like not to feel like that.
100%.
And I think that was like the really big thing for us, wasn't it? And discovering that. In what moments do you realise that, wait a minute, I've been like this wound up for so long. What does it feel like to all of a sudden
not be?
Yeah.
And have a chance to step away from that being like your default and your norm.
Yeah.
Because I've said before, and then sort of thinking, looking back as a child and looking back about what we went through and remembering those experiences and remembering just feeling just really a lot of things, but like scared and all the rest of it. I was there with my brothers, but it was the whole time. It was a really like I cannot, unless you've had like, and it's not, and I'm not downplaying different levels of stress, but there's a kind of stress that you can have as a child, which you can't turn around and go, do you know what? I'm really stressed at the moment. Like it's such an unusual experience, and it's no one that you can really explain it to.
I think that's a really important thing. Just not being able to articulate what you're going through, because you've got I don't know about you, but I think a big part of it is you have no other reference point. Like we said, if you've had this kind of, I don't know, first of all, you're at a particular age where you don't have the conceptual tools or the language to talk about things and express it.
Yeah.
And I also don't think you have that sort of self-insight. You don't really know what's going on. And I don't know about you, but I think particularly from a very, very young age, become very good at kind of masking it or working with it or denying it. And I think that's a big part of my own personal story. And I don't know about you, but I think part of that story is why I ended up studying the certain things that I did, really. I mean, we can talk, I guess, we can talk a little bit about my own experiences. So I was born in a part of rural Lincolnshire. I was born in Boston Hospital, was where I was born, and I was raised in a town, say 20 minutes away from that. My dad, he left school at 15, started working when he was 15 as an electrician, got with my mum very early on as well. So they were together at a very, very young age. My dad was one of those guys, he sort of worked all the time, and he did quite well for himself, kind of like, I won't quite say nouveau rich, but he wanted all those kind of trappings, all those things, particularly in the like late 70s and the 80s. He wanted all that material stuff, proper Thatcher kind of ideas about making yourself and all that. And he, that was a really big part of his life. And with that, he also used to go out every night. He was a proper working class bloke who really enjoyed himself. My mum, so she had her first kid pretty young, really, really young. And pretty much her whole life was built around my dad. And they went on to have quite a few kids, me being one of them, obviously. But with that, there's a lot of stresses and strains in their relationships. There's a lot of drinking with both of them for different reasons. A lot of fights and lots of things happened. A lot of stuff that definitely people would say, that's trauma-inducing.
Yeah.
And I experienced some really horrible stuff, you know, really, really horrible stuff. Unfortunately, at that time, you know, people didn't speak about stuff. People didn't share some of the things that happened for various reasons. And because of that, I lived through stuff, and then I didn't get any kind of support with that. You know, I didn't get, you know, any kind of psychological help, any kind of social work. You know, things nowadays, you know, some serious caring issues, you know, certain things that have been done straight away.
Yeah.
So I kind of lived through that. And my mum and my dad separated when I was pretty young, probably about 12. And so I kind of lived alone with my dad in his house for quite a few years. And my dad wasn't really about that much. And at that time, it's kind of like, you think it's kind of like in some ways you think it's kind of like a blessing. Like, you're a young kid, you know.
You can do what you want.
Yeah, and around that time I got into skateboarding. So I was really into skateboarding. Every night after school I'd go out skateboarding, and I got into punk and hardcore and hip hop as well. So I'd be like listening to all this music around my house with my mates, and like, you know, way over time. It sounds really, really good. But then when I got to about 16, 17, I started to feel a bit weird. And then I started going to college. And I remember being in this like media and communications class, and I had my first panic attack. And it was like, what the, you know, just I had no idea what was going on. Why do I feel this really overwhelming sense of fear? And I just got up and I went out. And I was like, what the, you know, I really could not understand what had happened to me. I was just like, and just constantly was, And obviously going up to that point, there was some constant
moments.
There was some rumbling anxiety going on, but I'm like, you know, whatever, I'm just going to skateboard, I'll turn some music up really loud, I'll go and listen to a bit of Public Enemy or listen to a bit of Crass, you know, or whatever, you know, make sense of it in that kind of way. But then it started to get more and more, and then I was just like constantly feeling scared and terrified, and I just really, really didn't know what was going on. Then I started to become really obsessed about things like what I later understood, much later in my life. I started to suffer what they call existential OCD. Yeah. Where I'd become obsessed about the meaning of life and everything. Am I here? Do I exist? Does anyone else exist? And I'd be reading all these books like Sartre's Nausea. I started reading everything. I wasn't reading for fun. I was reading for survival. I needed to know what was going on. If I could only find that one answer, everything's going to be all right. And I could work out, you know, I'd be started reading psychology books, what's going on with me, you know, just trying to sort everything out. And also simultaneously I had a lot of shame about it as well. Yeah. Because particularly growing up in my kind of working class, very masculine kind of family, you just don't talk about it. Like, well, you didn't talk about that kind of stuff. And I was a bit of the kind of, what can we say, the outlier in a sense, because the rest of my brothers were all like working with my dad and stuff like that. My sister had left, you know, earlier on. She had her own incredible journey, but that's another story, but become an incredible person out of this stuff. But so I was a bit of an outsider. So they already thought I was a bit of a freak, you know, because I was into skateboarding. I wanted to read and then I wanted to go study and stuff like that. And I remember one point, like, I think after lots of this stuff was going on, you know, like loads of panic attacks and all that, I ended up going to the doctors in the end because I was just desperate. I was like, what's going on? And I just remember getting back and my dad going to me, what did he say? Did he say it was me? You know, like, and my poor dad, he's a lovely guy. He was obviously concerned. He knew somewhere inside himself that the environment that I was brought up in was a massive trigger for all this. Yeah. You know, constant panic attacks, and then just this like generalized anxiety that I come to understand it. After a while, I learned about panic attacks. They stopped bothering me, to be honest with you. But the anxiety that was just constantly there, now that was another thing. Yeah. You know, that was a real, like, every single interaction, you know. And then I was carrying around all this shame about kind of what I'd witnessed growing up and things between my family and the drinking, you know. Let's just give you another example. When I was very, very young and my mum was going through a really difficult time, and I can talk about that now because my mum's dead. And she had her own really difficult life as well. I remember I used to have to go to the off licence and buy her beer. You know, I'd buy her 4 tins of Alston Pills, 10 number 6 dip cigarettes every night. Yeah, every night. Okay. 4 tins of pills. Yeah, and I'd be able to buy myself her own bottle of Ruddles County. And I was like 11 or whatnot. Go back, she would drink that. You know, she's a little woman and she's drinking 4 tins of Alston Pills, and then she's taking whatever medication that she was on as well. So that kind of gives you another sense of the kind of stuff that was going on. Anyway, so I ended up going to university, and first year in university, we went,
Yeah.
It was like all of a sudden I felt, no, I'm not scared. The anxiety's gone. I was like, I don't know. This is really weird. Obviously, I think it was just a big change of the situation. I'm in South London, Camberwell, where I was living at the time. At university, everything's feeling excited. All the things that are around me radically changed. The environment had changed. Everything had changed. So for that moment, everything felt really different. I had a sense of the future and a kind of possibility, and a different way of being was presented to me. I'm like, I can start thinking and exploring these things. So it was a really, really exciting time. But then I remember getting past that first year and then like moving out of halls. I remember just like all started coming back to me again. I remember reading Michel Foucault. And I remember starting to think about things like discourse, reality, social construction of reality, all these things. And that sort of set me off into this kind of OCD sort of thinking again. And me, I just would not stop thinking. And so when I'm reading these books, like I say, I'm reading to survive. And then I just got really bad, anxious again. And in for the first time in my life, I was like, right, I'm going to take these SSRIs, because this is so terrible for me. It's like, all the feelings, and reality and disassociation that I was feeling. And I took them. And I was like, wow, kind of weird. I can't have these like weird like thoughts anymore. Like it felt like it stopped this edge, but at the same time it also felt like it had numbed things around me. Which is interesting. I think the one I had was Seroxat or Paroxetine. I can't remember the name now. This was the early days of it. And at the time they said, there's no side effects. There's no withdrawals for all this stuff. Anyway, we found out there still was. And in my own case, it took me years of me tapering myself to get me off them, which I did in the end. I think by the time we'd finished our master's degree, I'd managed to taper myself off them. So anyway, after that, I kind of was all right. But like we said, there was that just...
So that's a long time.
That is a long time. I was struggling on my own. Big thing with it as well, I think I should say it, is I didn't really get diagnosed with OCD until a lot later.
That's quite recent, isn't it?
Well, relatively. But I was ashamed to talk about some of the symptoms I had. And then obviously after time changes, there's much more kind of, people are proactive, like we create to some extent, at least a society now where people can talk a lot more about these kind of things. And I think that made it easier for me. And when I finally realised that actually some of this stuff that was going on with me, that's a form of OCD. It was kind of liberating, to some extent. And to realise that OCD can take many different forms. Really. The amount of different forms, it like takes on any shape, it's like water, it'll just take the shape of the thing that you put it in. So for me, I had it in so many different ways. Coasting along. With that, I did a few jobs, worked at a couple of universities and stuff like that. And then I had a partner and she got pregnant. And then we had some problems with immigration. So I had to leave the country, just leave everything behind. And then I went to live in Canada for a bit. And then my daughter was born in Canada. And it was like, okay, I was there. I was like, everything's all right. But obviously I'm inside, there's knocking going on. Like I'm running out of fuel here, but I'm surviving because I have to survive to keep with my family. And there was all the stresses of keeping us together because, my partner wasn't allowed back into the UK. So there was all that going on. But I'm in Vancouver and stuff. I can't really work and everything. And then my daughter's born and it seems really all right and all that. I'm like, this is okay. And I said, well, what do we do? Well, I can't work here because I haven't got the right visa for it. What do I do? I'm sort of trapped. Well, what I can do at that time, we're a member of the EU. So because of the treaty rights, I can't remember the Sing route or whatever it was, I could go live legally in the EU with my partner, even though I couldn't bring her back here. So what did I do? I go live in Spain because I could actually take my wife and my kid to live in Spain, but I can't take them here. So that's what we do. Then while we're there for a year, we'd like exercise these treaty rights, which you can do, which you can't obviously no more. I was there after a year. I worked in a call centre. Probably lost half my hearing from that. Again, running on fumes, but just like eventually we get back to the UK and end up working for a little bit in a university. And I end up doing a lot of work, covering a lot of teaching and stuff like that. And it's at that point, it all starts to come back to me with a vengeance.
Yeah.
Not just the anxiety, but the OCD. And it's interesting because I'm teaching classes, you know, I'm covering and convening, doing the lectures and all that stuff on like sociology and doing mental health and all this. And I'm teaching all this stuff, you know, all these different multiple perspectives, you know, anti-psychiatry stuff, you know, stuff about structural inequality, you know, all different things about it. And like pharmaceuticals, the industry, you know, construction, the social construction of shyness and, you know, all these kind of things, social anxiety disorder. And that at the same time, I'm giving classes, and at one point I'm giving this seminar and I just have this crazy feel of disassociation. It's like I can see myself thinking and I'm talking about this stuff in this class. And it's like, if you've not had that experience.
Yeah, I have.
It's so weird.
I used to have it a lot as a child.
Yes.
I used to have it a lot, like to the point where I used to sometimes take myself out of myself just so that I could cope with what was going on. And I didn't realise until an adult that was a thing. So like whenever I used to think about stuff that had happened to me as a child, and sometimes there's a story that I retell, like I've told within my family, because it's the moment when I know, it's the moment from when I'm about, so my younger brothers are born, so it's a moment when I'm about 3.5, nearly 4, that I know the situation that we've been living in for the last few years is over. It's like this one moment. And it's a day that happens within our family where I'm just like, the police are called. The police have been called before, but the way that this unfolded and the way that the police came into our home, and I'm doing it. I'm staying within myself as I'm retelling it, but I could quite easily pop out of myself. But it's the way that the police came into our home, and I think that they knew that there were children in the home and that they'd been to the home before. But it's where the children emerged from within the property, and then that they thought there was quite a few. They knew there were children, but I don't think they realised how many children there were and how many young children there were, and how within that situation the older children, me and my older brothers, had protected the younger children. And there's a look that I had with a policeman, and he looked at me, and I was like, "This is it. This is over." Like it was that one moment, and I was like, "This is over. We will no longer live within this as a family." And it was just like, but whenever I tell that story, and because also like I'm telling you that story, I'm also smiling, right? But also at the time, there's no reason to smile. But whenever I tell that story, it's like when I told this, like we like as a family, like a few years ago we had therapy, and when I told this story, and the therapist's like, "Do you realise that you're laughing?" And I said, "Yeah, I know I'm laughing. I don't know if it's not funny," but she said, "That's your brain sort of protecting you." And then I said to her how I sort of when I used to tell that story, how I used to see myself in that situation from like being essentially like a security camera in the corner. That's how I would look down onto this. She said, "Dad, that's your brain is basically looking after you." Yeah. And there's like loads of situations in my childhood where I'm just thinking, and it's like, yeah, that's you. That's because it's such a like, it's so mad. Essentially, what you went through is so crazy and chaotic and all the rest of it that your brain can't quite, and especially as your young brain couldn't quite cope with that, and has essentially protected you from that.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, that level of disassociation, whatever you want to call it, the numbness of it is incredible. I mean, the amount of times I've told some of the stories to different therapists over the years, and it's just like telling a story.
Yeah.
And it's not like I'm really feeling like I'm there. Although, I mean, that's when I think I started to really get more insight into myself, was when I did start to get close to the feeling of it. But it's interesting, that numbness. I remember, like, this is about skateboarding. So I remember, like, being in this kind of vacant state, out with my mates, skateboarding in Peterborough in this multi-storey car park, doing this ollie onto this curb and falling off and hit myself. And the pain woke me up. And it was like, wow. It literally lifted me out of my numbness. And that's what I mean. You just don't know these levels, these layers of protection that you build up, you know.
Because then I remember saying to my mum, like during COVID, because so like going back to COVID was like the first time that I'd had, we were in lockdown. I had a part-time job and I was furloughed. And so I was like, I don't have to do anything. This is the first time as an adult or not being at uni or whatever that I can just stop. And I can afford to stop.
Yeah.
And so like having that luxury, and you're like, and that was really, that and initially I was like, yeah, this is brilliant. And it was brilliant because it was like, this is the first time in my entire life that I've just stopped everything. I'm not studying. I'm not having to go to work a few days a week. I'm not having to like get up and keep going. And I remember saying to my mum, this is like the first time I've rested, really. And I said, we should have rested as children.
Exactly, yeah.
I said, my mum thought I was like being a bit silly. She was like, what, not go to school? I said, yeah, like... Maybe, yeah. I said, like, not go to school for like a week or like a couple of... whatever. I'm like... I said, you know what we went through. You know that, like, sometimes literally we'd be in one home, and because it would all fallen apart again, we came to you, where it was calmer, and everything was how it should have been. In a couple of days, we began back to school, and you just like, I said, everything's normal. Like, we were behaving as if everything was normal.
Yeah.
And it's not like you didn't ever say like how we didn't cry and we didn't have moments where we sort of. Like when children react to a situation, but like we reacted now looking back, like really weirdly. We didn't react because it was such a weird, the whole situation and a lot of what we'd gone through was so like chaotic and all over the place. Our reactions to it, like I didn't react, let's be honest. I just was like, I'm chill. Like, so everybody was like, this child is fine. Like nowadays, everyone go, this child is clearly not fine.
Exactly.
Whilst the other ones who are like acting out, they're not fine, but we can tell that they're not fine, and we can deal with that. It's this one who is not, who is totally just like, I'm cool as a cucumber, mate.
Exactly.
It's like, no, I'm not. I'm having a dreadful time.
Well, it's that like one particular night where I saw some violence happened and someone had to go to the hospital, and the police were involved, and I just got up the next day, went to school, as if nothing had happened, and that's it. It's this thing. It's like. Yeah, to have that, like, to go to that thing that you're saying, the deep rest. You're off. You have 2 days and you've got to get back to work, or you've had your 10 weeks of therapy, you've got to get back on it.
Yeah.
Or it's like, and I've got to admit, I wanted to be well so much, like from when I was so young, that every time that I had some kind of therapy, I convinced myself I was all right.
Yeah.
Because I was so desperate to be okay, and also I think I was BSing to the therapist a lot of time, and because of that I never really fully sat with what was going on in me. I really didn't know really inside me, so I'd read all this stuff like anthropology, sociology of the body, embodiment, about stress, and I read all this stuff on like sociologists is using epidemiological stuff, allostatic load, all this kind of stuff. I knew it all in the abstract, but I never sat with any of that. And I think it was until that point when I started to actually, right, I've got to be with this. It wasn't until that point that then I started to have those moments of things opening up for me. Like saying like you in deep rest during COVID. It's cheesy. I mean, I've got such a critical head that I'd always be so sceptical of even any therapy and stuff like that. It really, really was. Even for like, I was one of the first people to get, the early people who used to get mindfulness early on, and it didn't kind of work for me because I convinced myself it worked for me. I wasn't really even doing mindfulness. I was just convincing myself.
But I did I never really had any, my brothers had therapy because they were obviously clearly in need of stuff quite early on. So they got stuff from, and I didn't get any. But then as an adult, I think my stress came out as anger. Yeah. So I'd react really angrily to quite sort of mundane things sometimes, just like out of the blue, just like an overreaction to things. And so I went, and it was starting to impact one particular relationship I had. So I went and did so I've been slightly put together by CBT. So I know how to manage myself, but I've not really dealt with anything. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Like, you just do a little bit of talking, but then after a while, it's just like, I was kind of like, I don't really want to share all of this with you because I don't have the time. Like, I've got it for free, thank you very much, on the NHS. It's a short thing, maybe like 6-10 weeks. It's like, we can't get to the root of this. I know what the root is, and I don't really want to get into it right now. Because if I do, it could quite clearly destabilise whatever I've got going on. So I need to hold myself in place for the time being.
It's literally holding yourself together. Holding yourself together, literally. That's it, innit? And that's it. You just don't know what it's like to really let go.
Yeah.
And have that. And you say, like, on furlough, you can properly let go.
Yeah.
And whatever comes up, it's going to come up because you know the next day you can still sit.
But then also, like, interestingly, during that time, I had these neighbours for a couple of years, and there was like domestic violence in the property below me.
Yeah.
Right. And I realised, so like for years I was kind of like, I'm fine. Whatever's happened to me as a kid, I'm kind of fine. I have these moments, but you know what? Mostly I can deal with myself.
Yeah.
I can deal with who I am. I know how to behave myself now. And the older I've got, I've slightly got less angry, and that's for lots of different reasons. But then for 2 years, I had this family, and it was, to be honest, quite triggering. Like I did, like, and I didn't, and to the point where it's kind of, they've gone and I've got new neighbours and it's fine, but I am slightly, I'm triggered by noise.
Yeah, I'm sensitive to noise.
I'm like really sensitive to noise, and if I can't work out what it is, and if I can hear distress, which I think most people, if they hear distress, it's a bit like, but actually I found it quite like, in a sense that I had to leave my property. Yeah. And it's just like, this I can't quite cope with, and it's kind of what I had to do to like deal with that. I had to call the police, right? And I didn't want to call the police because I was thinking I don't want to get the police involved. To me, like, domestic violence is domestic violence, and I couldn't quite work out who was instigating whatever, but there were children in the property, and I was just like, like, this is not right for like young children to be in this home like with this going on. So I was like, there was a time when there was a couple of occasions where I had to call the police, and I was like, I don't want to call the police because I don't think the police. Sometimes you don't want the police for something, but we don't have another service or whatever in that moment. So, but it's like, somebody needs to know because there's children in the property, and these adults are not. There's loads of stuff going on, and they're not really possibly thinking in the same way that I'm thinking.
It's really difficult. I mean, like with the particular person in my family, if the police had come, that person would probably ended up being put away. Yeah. And then I always wonder what would have happened to me. Yeah. If that person had got put away. Also, one thing I think I can say about myself with that particular situation, I always knew that the person who did what they did, it wasn't really their fault as such. I knew that there was stuff going on that had happened to them. Yeah. In their did you think that at the time, or do you think that now as an adult, no, like you've reflected a bit more? I knew, because I knew that there was two people in this really rubbish situation where multiple things are happening, alcohol, gender stuff, loads of different things going on there. And I knew, even at that young age, that someone had acted out of complete desperation and wasn't in their best of mental health. Yeah. And I even knew that. And I'm still glad to this day that I know that. I wish there was some other support there, because I wouldn't have got to go for this long journey that I had. You know, going back to that thing, like you said, you know, even that sensitivity to noise, the fact is that, you know, you have all these multiple childhood adverse experiences, and now they wreak havoc on us. Like our bodies have been changed because of that, you know. And it's interesting for me, and realising that you know, I thought that at one point that if I just got the right information, I'd sort myself out. And I realised that actually all the stuff that I've learned, I mean, it's useful in some respects, but it never helped me really that much. It did help me understand certain things, but it didn't help me, you know. And until I could actually go in and literally experience stuff in myself, you know, like be with that, really let stuff come up and just, you know, just go back to that deep rest and the importance of it, and the importance to really have that time to do that. I don't think I would have got anywhere, you know, and it was only when I started to realise, like, you know, understand how thinking works and all this stuff, you know, that I learned through therapy and through whatever other things that I did. You know, you need the time to do that. And I don't think we have that time.
We don't have the time now, do we? And I don't know. We don't. You know, like yeah. I know there are sort of some people who are like advocates for rest, but I think as a society, like, that's not. It's like you got a weekend, innit? You can just do it at the weekend, or you get you get 20 days a year holiday, you can rest then. You're like, no, we need to have these things built in because
we have so much going on. We have all the kind of, that word dramaturgical stress of trying to perform a particular role. And we live in a society where we're constantly having to take on different kinds of identities in different situations. And I don't think social media, it's a cliche thing to say, has helped that.
Yeah.
There's kind of all this role strain about we should have achieved this at this age and blah, 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 and we should have done this and done that. Then at the same time, we have the stigmatisation of who we are that we're trying to work with as well. Like, I'm this person, and because I'm this person, it means this. And there's all these assumptions about me. And then you're kind of constantly battling against them. And then there's this thing that you don't really want to, you need to embrace what you've gone through, but then you don't want it to define you. We've talked about this before. We shouldn't have to have a traumatic experience or have suffered to be recognised and taken seriously. Yeah. And it's really hard to unpick that, because me and you can sit here and talk about this, and in some senses it's really great and it can be liberating, and I think it'd be really useful for other people, but we don't want to be defined by that.
No,
because in a way that can feed back into it. I'm Twayna, I'm the person who was brought up in this environment, that's your identity. Karl, I'm this person who went through this. We're not that, we're more than that. I've tried
to, in the recent years that I've sort of started to talk about this stuff publicly, is that I've kind of gone, this happened to me, these things happened to me, whereas I think for years there was a lot of shame, and I think there still is some low-level shame, because there's loads of stuff that I don't know. There's the older I've got, the more I've sort of I don't really know that much. I don't know that a great deal about my birth mum's, just who she is. I know we lived together as a family for a few years, but I was too young to know anything or ask any questions. And then when you sort of come into care and you're adopted, you don't get loads of information. The information sort of stops. You don't. It's just kind of what is known, and that's it. And so, but when I look at her life, and it's just, I don't know. I feel sorry for her, and I feel sorry for her and what she went through, with her children. Because if you look at elements, she I think there's interesting things that had sort of happened, which it's sort of not been. I've not read my file, and I don't know what it would say. But I don't think, even if I read the file, I don't think it would take into account who she was and her experiences of kind of what made her who she was. And there's a few things that I think define her. So she came to this country as a 14-year-old from the Caribbean. Her parents had come to this country before without her. So she's like that generation of children whose parents came here first and were sort of left behind. So they're like the barrel children. So they come later on. So she'd come to this country. Imagine coming to this country in the 60s from the Caribbean, and you've not seen your parents for a while, for a good few years. I think they were her parents. But when you come to the country, your parents have had some more children. And so you're the only child, you're the oldest child, and you don't know your siblings. And your family's sort of moved on without you. And so then you come into this country, this cold, hostile country, do you know what I mean? And you look different and you sound different. And then for whatever, and then a few years later, in your early 20s, you have children. And then one of your children, this is my twin, passes away. So so you've got two. So my mum had 3 sets of twins. So my older brothers, who are a year and a half older than me, and then me and my sister, and my twin passed away when we were 10 weeks old. And then 3.5 years later, my younger brothers, there were 2 of them, and one of them passed away when they were 6. But that was slightly later. That was when they were in care. We were all in care at this point. But it's just imagine when you first start interacting with social services, there's your life as what's happened to you in the Caribbean. Your parents are there, they've left, you're left to live with whoever you're living with. Don't know who that is, possibly grandparents. Then you come to this country, and then when you're a young adult, you have children, and then one of your children passes away when, do you know what I mean? It's just it's kind of like our lives didn't fall apart in a vacuum. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, when you talk about like foster care and adoption, it's like these kids' lives apparently fall apart in a vacuum. And it's like, no, these are the parents who are having these children. And it's kind of like, these are the experiences. There's like loads of adults with like adverse experiences of their own and trauma. And then you're expected, and then like the children that these people have.
They've inherited a lot.
They've inherited a lot of that, but also like they're part of like, that's just another burden for them to have to like, to cope with.
Yeah, yeah.
Because they've not had all the other stuff.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, imagine like loads of people don't, but like imagine being raised by parents who've got so much stress. Is it a surprise that you have, that you take that on and that becomes part of your experience?
Yeah. I mean, that's why all the epigenetic stuff now is such a big thing, isn't it? Like not just for, well, the social scientists as well, you know. And we carry it. We it's not right to say we're carrying the weight, but we're already, I don't use the word predisposed. We're vulnerable to stuff. We're
susceptible to stuff.
Yeah, we're vulnerable to stuff, but we also have the awareness of it as well. So we don't just literally carry it in our bodies, whatever, genetically or whatever. We actually have it in our scripts that we have about ourselves, the way in which we relate to the world, the prism through which we see the world and ourselves, unfortunately, is tainted to a certain extent by that. And that's always the thing for me. And I know, because this is important for you, this idea of deep rest, but that idea of it's almost to give ourselves that space to feel completely different is like, can be radically liberating, you know, to know that you can feel different outside of all this cumulative stress in your life, all the stuff that we inherit psychologically, socially, you know, and through our bodies. To know that you can feel different is a really important thing. You know, one time I sat on the balcony. I started to do this it's like meditation type thing, but it's all about really feeling everything. Really, you drop into your body and you just. And I've just been doing that a lot. And I remember one time I was sitting on the balcony. I was visiting some family in Vancouver, and I sat on the balcony, and I think I might have told you this before. And I sat there. I was like, holy, I've never felt like this. I've never known what it's like not to be worried. Yeah. I've never known what it's to be like not to feel this weird feeling that's been in the back of my head, you know, or in my body or in my stomach. I'd never known it until that moment. I just sat there and thought, wow, do people feel like this? How come I've got all these decades in my life and I didn't know this is what it's like to feel? That's kind of liberating. But then how do we create the conditions for that to happen for people? I'm lucky because I'm not lucky and I am lucky. Yeah, it might take me a long time to get there, and I suffer still, and I will suffer because I'm changed. You know, my body's changed, my brain's changed, but I'm doing all right. You know, compared to what I was like. You know, completely different. But I'm lucky. I'm lucky that I learnt some skills. I so happened went to university, met people like you, got introduced to certain ideas. They didn't help at first, but they did then give me the capacity and the tools to then look in other directions and other places to help for myself. Right? And give me the space and time to do it. Not many people have that. The way that you get meted out a certain amount of time of care on the NHS, the way that we have a society that judges people with mental illness in a particular kind of way. Yeah, we were caring for mental illness, we understand, we take it seriously, but really how serious do they take it? When you have people saying, oh, like, you're just a kind of snowflake, you know, you're whatever, you're just, you know.
But then we've got like a mad like loads of young people, like, like I'd say like the under 25s, like a really stressed generations of like young people.
For sure. I mean, with my daughter, I worry so much for her because she's obviously inherited certain things from me, well genetic stuff, and and she's got social anxiety and kind of things like that, and she spends a lot of time online reading things and stuff, you know, and engaging with social media. You can tell she'll say, I mean, luckily for her, she's emotionally intelligent enough to articulate it, and I never could. But I still worry about these generations and when they're going to get the space and the time, and or is it even going to happen when they're constantly turned on? Got like stuff going into their brains that they don't get that space to, you know. How is this deep rest thing going on?
It's going all right, you know. I'm quite chilled. Like, I usually have one day a week where I do not leave the house and possibly,
What do you do? Just lay down, do nothing?
Lie down or just sit on the sofa, legs up.
Yeah.
And read.
Good one. Yeah. Yeah.
Just watch rubbish telly. Usually just like lie down.
Yeah.
And just chill. And maybe like snooze and stuff.
It's a weird one to do, isn't it? Because it wasn't really until the pandemic that you really knew how to do it.
Yeah.
Let myself
do it. But also like it was that thing like you said, like day after day I would wake up and be like, do you know what? I feel all right. Like I feel all right. And there's like certain people that I wasn't communicating, like having to deal with. And it's kind of like, it just was like a nice chilled feeling. And then, you know, like when we were allowed to go out for walks and stuff. And like, I remember somebody texting me, goes, do you want to go for a walk? And this person was always, just whenever I used to see her, she just always be like, there'd always be like issues. And I'd be like, and I was like, no, actually, I don't want to go out for a walk. It's like, I'm chill now. I haven't got time for like, you're going to ruin my buzz.
You just say a lot about having a 4-day week.
I work 3 days now.
But 4
days is like
for everyone.
But for everybody.
Yeah, I think it will.
People are productive, obviously, but also like everyone now, one of the things from the pandemic is like work-life balance. People are like, wait a second, I need some me time. And the way that the world works, and if you're full on 5 days a week and whatever, it's like, it's not enough. Is it not enough? You just burn out.
I've got one question.
Yeah.
And it goes back to something that I said before. How do you now navigate, integrate all this stuff without being defined by it in a way that makes you kind of in a victimised way? How do you work with that? I mean, obviously your comedy and everything like that's really helped, I imagine.
I'm kind of casual about it. I'm just like, this is me, but it's not me. And I think sometimes the way that I talk about it, I'm not really sentimental about it. When I recorded the show for the radio, when I did the live show before, and I found some people in the room just would react slightly to a few bits, and you could see them just like thinking about me possibly as a child, and it's just like, yeah, I don't want you to do that. So when I recorded the show and I explained to people, I said, look, this is a comedy show. I'm gonna tell you a few things. I'm going to mention a few things, and it's happened as a child, but I don't want you to sit there and think about me as a child. And you can laugh. This is like, I think this is funny. I've made the bits funny. There's no, just laugh. Don't think, I don't want you to, do you know what? I don't want you to feel sorry for me.
Yeah.
Because I don't feel sorry for myself and my brother. No. We've never felt sorry for ourselves. We felt angry. We felt annoyed about certain things, but that's our business.
No,
it's our business. It's not for you to like. This is not for you.
That's totally.
And so it's totally like, that's how I. Because I've heard other people talk about stuff, and they're like, don't feel sorry. I don't want people's pity.
Me too, and I totally get that. I often find myself that I'm trying to make them feel better.
Yeah, no, I try not to. That's the thing. That's another annoying thing. It's like when sometimes you explain, and I try not to explain certain things to people because it's like, one, it's not your business. Two, I know that I'm going to have to deal with how you feel. And it's like, bro, like seriously.
Yeah, I know.
Like I was doing all right. Now I have to comfort you.
Exactly.
I have to comfort you because you feel traumatised by I'm like, something's gone wrong here.
I'm a crier, right?
Yeah.
And I don't give a whatever, and I embrace it. I enjoy it. You know, I mean, I used to get called soft lad and things like that.
Yeah.
But no, I am a soft lad. I love it, and I'll tell a story about some things, and it'll make me feel tearful. And I'll go, "Don't you worry." Yeah. And I'm like, I'm crying, and I say, "I'm crying here, but I'm not suffering."
Yeah.
I'm crying because of the emotions flowing out of me, and it's kind of like in my mind, even though the tears are coming out, I'm thinking, I don't want this person to feel sad. Don't feel sorry for me.
But it's also that thing of like, you know, and I had this conversation with somebody the other day, but like how when we hear like experiences of like kids in care and stuff, we only hear like there's two experiences, right? It's one of the exceptional, the one who survived and is an exceptional person. So like, I'm talking about like famous people. And so like, then you're held up as like the ideal.
Yeah. Or
there's the dead child. Yeah. And that's the two. And I tell you what, the experiences, the experience is all the ones in the middle, and no one hears about those.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like I come along, so I think they're expecting trauma or like extreme, and it's like, I'm not giving you either. It's just like,
No.
I'm here, I'm just a normal person. I've had some weird stuff, unfortunate stuff. I'd preferred it not to have happened. It has happened. And do you know what? We're all right.
But maybe this is it, and this is a great point, because the narrative, the story, doesn't subscribe to either, oh wow, I had this trauma experience and everything became really great and enlightened, or I had this really trauma thing and everything ended.
Yeah.
And actually, amongst all this, I'm much more than that.
Yeah.
And there's been much more going on in my life.
And I'm not just those things as well.
Exactly. And that,
like in a way, the way I look at my life, it's the smallest part of my life.
Yeah.
Even though it was in a really important part of my life, and it was at a really defining time of my life. It's like, actually, there's so much more has happened outside of that.
Well, I just think, to maybe a way of finishing off on that topic, think about all the time we spent together at university. Were we standing there going, oh, I'm traumatised? No, we're just having a laugh.
We're having a laugh.
Learning all this stuff and having a good time. And that's it. And that's what I mean. Can't be defined by this stuff. And it's good that you can create a story and use the comedy to say, yeah, this happens, but it's not all there is going on.
Nice one. We're going to end it there. Thanks, Karl.
Thanks, mate.
Thank you for listening to Surviving Society.
To support our work, you can rate,
review and subscribe to host or produce a series of Surviving Society.
Get in touch with us via Twitter or Instagram.